And here we are for a new instructional game. My opponent is rated 2044 and he opens with the d4 pawn and I will play d5. My opponent plays knight to f3, knight to f6. For now, no decision has been made regarding the pawn structure. We still don't see the move c4 coming, as in the queen's gambit, and my opponent plays a3. He blocks the c1 bishop, but his idea is to free the f1 bishop to quickly support the c4 push. Well, since he hasn't played c4 himself, I'm interested in the move c5. And I'm going to play it, by the way. I'm going to prioritize playing c5. If he plays b flat 5 check, I can play foo d7 offering the exchange, or even cavalier c6. Because after faux b5 check, cavalier c6, if he doubles my pawns, it's not that bad, because those two pawns can be exchanged for the central pawns. For example, taking on d4, and if he recaptures, playing c5 again to impact the center, they can actually undouble themselves. And my opponent plays c3. Here he's playing in the spirit of the Colle system, which you might know. It's the same as the London system, except the bishop hasn't come out. In the London system, you bring out the dark squared bishop before playing a3, and in the Colle system, you immediately set up these very solid pawn structures. The idea is to follow up with bishop to d3, kingside castling, and maybe a bit later, this push to e4. After knight to d2, for example, rook to e1 to free the bishop on c1. I also have to be careful because ever since he played c3, he might try to take on c5 and be able to hold on to it. I think I'm going to take on d4, actually. If he recaptures with the knight, he loses control of the center. If he recaptures with the c3 pawn, his bishop will remain blocked. And if he recaptures with the pawn on e3, we have a pawn structure called Carlsbad, which you may know with this semi-open e file for him, and this one, the semi-open c file for me. So I'm going to take on d4. If he recaptures with the queen, it's the same. I play knight to c6. He loses central influence. So he recaptures with the e3 pawn on d4. I think that's his best option. And now I'm going to play knight to c6. Before playing e6, I'll definitely develop my bishop. There we go. I'll play bishop to g4. And if he plays queen to b3 to attack b7, I won't play rook to b8 to defend, because then he'll have bishop to f4. I think I'll play queen to d7 against knight to e5. I can take his knight. But after pawn recaptures, he attacks mine, and he can play bishop to b5, protected by his queen to pin my king. So I still need to take a look at that. Bishop to g4, can I get this bishop out? Queen to b3, he attacks b7. If I play bishop to f3, he plays queen takes b7, attacking, and then the knight. So I won't be able to do that. So after bishop to g4, queen to b3, I need to solve the problem on b7. Playing b6 is very dangerous because my knight will no longer be protected. Bishop to b5 will come with more force. So bishop to g4, queen to b3, how am I going to defend? b7, maybe queen to b6, but he can trade queens, ruin my pawn structure, and then his knight afterwards. He could be reinforced by knight to d2, for example. Or maybe even move. So bishop g4, queen b3, I don't have a good solution here to fix the problem. Maybe queen c8. qc8 looks okay. I'll play bishop to g4 and we'll look at the analysis for the move that should be played. Can we really afford to bring out the bishop before I play? e6 in any case, every time you bring out the bishop, you have to consider the counterattack with queen b3. Because the light squared bishop leaves the queen side to go to the king side, but as a result, the light squares on the queen side are less well protected and the opponent can try to target the b7 pawn. If the b7 pawn advances, the light squares will be even less protected, especially the knight on c6. There could be bishops to b5 to attack it, queens to a4, knights to e5. It's going to bombard the knight, which would end up pinned and unprotected. And maybe the best thing would be to go back. But here, he did kingside castling. So now I play e6. Now, it's not the same anymore. Because if I play queen to b3, I can play rook to b8. On f4, since I played e6, I can play bishop to d6 to block his dark squared bishop. So the critical moment regarding queen to b3 was before kingside castling, but we'll look at the analysis. I'm also curious to know if I could have gotten out of it. I would have played queen c8 on queen b3, but we'll also look at what the best defense is for black to defend b7. But I really wanted to get my bishop out before playing e6. Because you understand, there's this semi-open e file. For me, it's the semi-open c file. But the semi-open a file is a file next to the king side, which means it has space all along the side that leans toward the king. And so if I had left my bishop on c8, not only would my bishop have been passive, but on top of that, there could have been a lot of attackers targeting my future kingside castling. The bishop aiming, the other one as well, the knight that wouldn't be pinned and could join the attack. Maybe sometimes the queen, maybe even the rooks using the third rank to also join the attack on the castling. That's a lot of pieces. Whereas here, with the bishop on g4, I have one more piece to defend the side of my castling. Here, I'm simply going to play bishop to d6. He plays rook to e1, that's normal. The rook on the semi-open file, and I castling, that's normal too. Now the two armies are in place. We will have to create the development plans. For me, it's simple. The development plans, there are two of them. Either I play on the queen side to break this defensive chain of pawns by playing rook b8, then b5 and b4. If he played a3 before, I would play a5, then b4. To try to weaken his pawn structure, try to create weaknesses like isolated pawns, backward pawns, weak squares to be able to fight on the queen side, try to win a pawn or to infiltrate. Or I play with my central majority. I have two pawns against one. The problem is that pushing to f5, besides the fact that it's hard to do right now, would create an isolated pawn for me on d5. Once white exchange. Because white will exchange, they won't let the pawn go to e4. And so generally, to support this push to e5, you need to have the pawn on f7 move to f6, then e5, and in case of a capture, recapture with the pawn. Having a duo of pawns is stronger than an isolated pawn. Then you can look to play e4. But as you can see, in front of my pawn on f7, there's the knight, and it's hard to move the knight. First of all, it would take time to move the knight, then play f6 and e5. But moving the knight also means losing protection of the h7 pawn. You have to be careful. He plays queen to b3. So now he's putting pressure on b7. It's a bit late to attack this b7 pawn, but he also wants to unpin himself to give his knight more freedom. So now I can play rook b8 to prepare the b5 push. If he plays bishop takes, I'll play a6 and his bishop will be pinned, attacked and pinned. I'm also considering queen c7. Queen c7, why? It protects b7, targets h2, but also controls e5. If he wants to play knight to e5, I could then knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes. And if rook takes, of course I take back, because after rook to b8, he can break through on e5. And be careful, if I play knight takes, he recaptures with the pawn protected by the rook, and that's a fork. The pawn attacks both my bishop and my knight, so I'll play queen to c7 first. My rooks are connected, whereas he still has the bishop on c1, which isn't developed. But it's aiming towards my castling. No, really. What's questionable about his moves is having played queen to b3 now. Either he was testing this move in the opening, attacking b7 when I wasn't really ready to defend it. But here he puts his queen on the queen side to attack a weakness that's very easy to defend. I don't really see the point. He retreats to e2. And you see, he's starting to play moves that aren't bad. He doesn't lose any pieces, but they're moves that don't improve much his position. I'm going to play rook b8, I think. Thank you. There's a funny trap. It's when you have the bishop on f5. If his knight is no longer there, for example, if I play knight to h4 to attack my bishop, I have knight takes e5, which attacks his queen, then we take, and then bishop c2, which attacks his queen. But it doesn't work. His queen would have escape squares. It's amusing, but it doesn't work. So I'm just going to play simply rook to b8 to prepare the b5 push. Once again, if bishop takes a6, I attack his bishop. which is under the pin. He plays h3, he attacks my knight, and I'm not going to take. I'm going to play bishop h5. Maybe bishop f5 was actually better. He plays a 4 precisely to counter the b5 push, and I'm going to play a 6 because he can't play a 5. There would simply be knight takes protected by the queen. Meanwhile, the jackhammer has started up next to my place. You might hear it. It's a bit unpleasant, but oh well. Still, do me the favor of continuing to watch this video. So he plays knight f1. He wants to bounce back to g3, certainly to attack my bishop and free his own bishop. But if he comes to g3, I have a double take. Here, I'm also interested in knight e4. But I'm going to play my plan b5. Oh, no, now b.5. I can't play it anymore. Pawn takes, he takes. And I no longer have any pawns to attack his bishop. Still, we have to take a look. b5, pawn takes, bishop takes, and maybe queen b6. His bishop is attacked twice, and I don't think he has the means to defend it a second time. So we can still play b5. Let's go for it. He takes, I take back. After bishop takes b5, we also have ideas like bishop takes knight, pawn takes, to ruin the pawn structure around his castling. That's not a bad idea either. But obviously, after bishop takes b5, queen b6 is stronger. But I could actually start by taking his knight to destroy his pawn structure and then play queen b6 afterwards. So if he plays bishop g5 to attack my knight, knight e4, and I simply counterattack his bishop. And here you can see he's starting to take a lot of time to think. He has less time than I do because the white position is actually inferior to that of black here. Black are better organized with better prospects for development. So why am I looking for this push? b4. It's because after that, I'll be able to capture and he'll have to recapture with the queen. And before he had a pawn structure, 3 pawns protecting each other. But without the c3 pawn, it will be 2 isolated pawns. So he plays bishop e3. I think I can play. Before, if he pushes c4, there's knight to a5, which comes to attack his queen. And his c4 pawn. So I send the pawn to b4. He pushes c4, you see, but knight to a5. So he can sacrifice the exchange sacrifice. Rook takes, queen takes, and maybe play c5 afterwards so that my bishop has to leave. But we're still going to play this knight to a5 move, which looks very strong to me because it attacks his queen. And now I triple the attacks on the c4 pawn. The knight attacks c4, but also reveals the queen, which also attacks c4. You see, that's a move he might not have anticipated. He sacrifices the exchange. Maybe that's the best thing he can do. And he follows up with c5 to create a passed pawn. Here, I think I'm going to play to c7. That way, if he plays knight to a5, I can take out his knight. Bishops to c7. So I've won the exchange. But his pawn structure has improved with the presence of this passed pawn. He plays knight to g3. I have a way to play bishop, takes, pawn takes, but is that really so interesting for me? I'm going to give him the pair of bishop. No, actually, that doesn't interest me. I'm going to play bg6 here. Since his knight g3, he has no play. It can't go to h5, f5, or e4. So I leave his knight on g3. On the other hand, I don't have an open file for my rooks. That's what's a bit annoying. Well, there is the a file after all. I can play rook to a8 and maybe look for a queen's exchange, queen a2. If he takes, I recapture with the rook, which attacks the b2 pawn because he's passed pawn, that's 5. It's not so dangerous for now. He plays knight to e5, and this is where I wanted to go. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and definitely knight d7 with the attack of the 2 pawns. And even if he comes to play bishop d4, I could make it so he has to take c5, the queen protects. So I take his knight, I give him the pair of bishops, it's true, but here I have the will to win back the pawn. I attack both. he can play. c6, but knight takes e5. We recover that pawn by attacking, by the way, c6. And he resigned. That's it. So let's analyze now. So the computer gives me 98% accuracy versus 91% for my opponent. With, do you see it? In the graph, a gradual nibbling away of the advantage in favor of black. So little by little, I built up my advantage. I gradually gained more and more ground and a positional advantage. Now let's look at this opening. So let's look at this opening, which is fascinating. d4, d5, there is knight f3, knight f6, e3. I send the pawn, c5, he plays c3, I exchange on d4, he makes the best recapture, knight c6. He places the bishop on d3. For now, his play is normal bishop g4, and here we question the move. Queen b3, could he play it or not? Well, the computer indicates that queen b3 is not dangerous. In reality, queen b3 I can play. Queen c8, as I mentioned earlier, but there are also other possible moves. And here I was surprised. So we can't play rook b8 because bishop f4 bothers me. But the computer says we could play it. Queen c7. But from the moment I saw bishop f4 after rook b8, I didn't want to put the queen on c7. Same for bishop ideas. f4, thinking that maybe he could sacrifice the bishop and then take on b7 and attack the knight and the rook. In reality, no, he can't play bishop f4. We simply take. And on queen takes b7, we are able to play rook c8 and defend. But that still leads to a complicated variation. Note that after queen c1 check, the king can come to e2 and the rook would attack the queen. But he can play bishop b5 and you still have to play queen c1 check, king to e2, take the rook. And on bishop takes c6 check, the computer shows a simple move. It is to play king d8. The queen can't come to d7 to deliver checkmate. And the knight can't join the attack with, for example, knight 5 to threaten knight f7 mate because it's pinned itself. And in this position, black has a material advantage. That means that after queen b3, we are perfectly able to play queen c7 and prevent bishop f4 from coming. And after queen c7, if white plays g3 to try to play bishop f4 afterwards, we can play bishop f3, win the piece. And when bishop f4 comes, of course, we can play, for example, queen b6 to offer an exchange of queens. We have an extra piece. So he can't refute the queen coming to c7. That's its best placement. It defends b7. And then we can continue with e6, bishop d6, and everything is fine. And of course, there's the possibility of playing bishop takes knight if he doesn't defend it, but he can play knight d2 to defend it. So let's see why he resigns. He plays knight e5. That's why I had retreated my bishop to c7 and not to e7. I wanted to exchange the bishop for the knight. And then after peon takes knight d7, he's going to lose another pawn. And you can see the computer's evaluation bar to the right of the chessboard. It's very favorable for black. The computer gives me almost a 3-point advantage, which is equivalent to an extra piece, because I have the exchange, meaning I have a rook for a bishop here. But on top of that, one of the 2 pawns is going to fall, maybe even both. And his piece placement isn't dangerous. The knight is unable to approach my side of the board. The white square bishop is ultimately aiming at nothing. The dark square bishop is only defensive and the rook won't be able to stand up to 2 rooks. So the game has become completely one-sided. Now I have a considerable advantage, and that's why he preferred to resign this game, especially since he even had less time than I did. You can leave me likes. It helps the video get noticed. Comments help me too. Same goes for those. You can support the channel and, of course, share the video. And we'll meet again soon for new adventures on the chessboard. Goodbye, everyone.